reality of teaching completely virtually, I started looking into ways of assessing my students authentically. Paper-based assessments were no longer an option. I needed to look at alternatives. A resource that I've been using that's been super powerful in transforming my online classroom is interactive digital notebooks. Digital notebooks are similar to physical notebooks, except they are paperless and are often created using Google Slides or PowerPoint. Digital notebooks also allow the embedding of external links and other resource integration. For example, you can use your Nearpod alongside with a digital notebook. Finally, they allow students to showcase their learning while sharing with teachers, peers, and parents. So why should you use a digital notebook? First of all, they're paperless, which is great for the environment. I can count the number of times I had to use the photocopy room ever since I started using digital activities instead of paper activities. It provides artifacts of learning and can be used later on during parent-teacher conferences or if you're trying to provide evidence of student progress over the year. Digital notebooks also allow creativity because they can be completely customized by students. They also infuse technology. You can add things like hyperlinks, animations. You can include online drag and drop activities. They also really promote the desired deeper learning that compels students to broaden their knowledge. And they allow for easy collaboration among students because they are found on drive-based apps, and therefore students can kind of share with one another and collaborate on one notebook. If you want to learn more about how to create your own interactive digital notebook and use a free template of one I already created for you, you will find a link to the detailed video on how to do that in the description box below. So just look for the title of the video and it's going to be right underneath that. Alright, next I will be sharing with you an example of a recent differentiated assessment I gave to my students using digital notebooks. For the goal of this assessment, I wanted my students to learn more about enzymes and how enzymes were affected by different factors. I also wanted them to learn more about enzyme structure and how it was closely tied to its function. At the same time, I wanted to make sure that my students felt that they had a choice and were guided through this assessment and the choices that were included inside of it. So here's an example of a differentiated assessment that I gave to my students recently. That was done on or using virtual notebooks. This is an enzyme virtual lab, and students were able to choose their own experiment to explore further on the topic of enzymes. And I always like to include learning targets at the beginning because this way the students are aware of exactly what they are being assessed on. The first part of the assessment was just an intro, and this is where students were kind of reviewing a lot of the basics that were included in this topic. And the main point of me having or wanting them to do this was making sure that the students were on the same page when it comes to a refresher of all the different terminologies and concepts that we have already discussed in the lesson. So this is kind of like a quick pre-assessment, informal pre-assessment. And when it comes to actually grading this assessment, I do not include, so this intro part is not included. I don't assess them on that because this is just, I consider it almost like a practice for them to have all the basics ready before they move on to the actual assessment part of this activity, which was the virtual experiments. And then here we have a drag and drop activity. So part of like interactive notebooks is the ability for them to be interactive, so students can actually move these around and label the different parts of the enzyme correctly. So again, it does add a little bit of interactivity and also increases engagement. Obviously, you can make this as intricate and as interesting as you would like. All right, so now we reach the choose your own experiment or choice board part of the assessment. So notice that I have two different activities or experiments that the students can do, and depending on which one they prefer, they will click on one of these icons and it will take them to that particular experiment. So the learning target that I included at the beginning was addressed in both of these experiments, but it was just kind of like addressed in two different ways. So both of these experiments are showing the students that when you change the structure of an enzyme, that in turn affects its function, and we're kind of looking at different things that would affect the structure. So they could either choose temperature or they could have chosen PH. Now, again, if they click on the particular icon that they prefer, it will take them to that particular experiment, and then they can move forward from there. So this is where the virtual experiment part comes to be. So they will watch me perform the experiment, just as if they are in the lab physically. This is kind of like what they would do themselves and what they would experience. And I just kind of, they have to just watch this demo video. And then based on the demo video, there's things and questions that they would need to fill in. And then we have the final part of this experiment, which was they have to fill in a graphic organizer using a particular method known as claim evidence reasoning. We use this in science a lot. But notice here that I have included a sample for them, okay? So a lot of the times I notice that if I don't model something for the students, they don't really grasp it fully. So I always like to include a sample, some form of modeling for the students to be able to see, to refer back to in case they need help. I've also included a lot of prompts or sentence starters. So a lot of the students do need that extra push or extra help, and that's why I've included the prompt options for those students that might need that. One particular part, which is the reasoning, and this is like the part that a lot of students struggle with the most, and that's why I included an extra graphic for that particular section. And that's about it. This is the assessment. So in terms of the rubric or how I assess the students, I always share the rubrics with students ahead of time, so they know exactly how I am assessing them. The rubric is also attached to the Google Classroom page, and as you can see, I graded them on specific categories or specific things in the digital notebook, including correct variables, hypothesis, claim, evidence, reasoning, and I used a 3-point system, and as you can see, there's a description for each of the categories. Students always have the rubric shared with them ahead of time so that they get an idea about what my expectations are and how I will be assessing them. I hope that this video was helpful in inspiring you to try digital notebook assessments in your own online classrooms. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a like and share it with any other teachers that might find it useful. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate it. Have a lovely day.